Very good evening to our viewers at home and indeed to our audience here tonight. Welcome to this special broadcast of the agenda. My name is Toibanje Bella. We are looking at a conversation around elections, especially the youth participation in elections and the perceived apathy of young people around registration points across the country. My name is Toibanje Bella, your host. I will just give a small introduction, of course, of the topic and then of my guests. So tonight's topic really, and it's going to be, this is the first in a series of similar public dialogues, public conversations with different members of society, leaders, academics, and so forth. But to kick off tonight's conversation, youth voting patterns in Namibia have been significant, or have seen significant changes since the country gained its independence in 1990. Initially, young voters tended to align with the political preferences of their parents and their families. However, over time, many young Namibians became more independent in their political choices, leading to a period of political apathy actually among young people, because at one point they did no longer feel obliged to follow the path of their parents. So some voted for different political parties while some completely stayed away from elections. But we have now seen a turnaround of general apathy and general disengagement from political processes, partly perhaps due to unmet expectations and the frustrations with the slow pace of socio-economic progress. So tonight we are engaging young people that are actively in politics and to get their take on how they got into that space and whether it's really worth it for young people to be involved in that. Now, introducing my guests, I have Honorable Inna Hengari. She is a member of parliament for the Popular Democratic Movement. She is also an activist in her own right. Thank you very much, Honorable, for making time and to be with us here tonight.
Good evening, Toivo, and thank you for having me.
Wonderful. We have also Dr. John Nakuta. He's a law scholar. He is an academic in the field of administrative law as well as human rights law. Also very vocal on key issues in our country. Thank you, Doctor, for making time.
Thanks, Toivo. Just, I'm not a young person.
Yeah, absolutely, but no, you are young at heart, and that for us suffices. And then, of course, we have Innocentia Gaoes.
Yeah.
So sorry to. Yeah, she is also a very vibrant young person. She is in the Swapo party structures of both the Youth League, the Commerce Regional leadership of the Youth League, as well as in the Swapo, the mother body, very active in the structures of Windhoek East District. She is, in fact, the spokesperson of the party in that district. Thank you very much, Inno, for coming around also.
Thank you for having me. So yeah, I'm a young person in the Commerce Regional Executive for the mother body.
Absolutely.
Swapo body, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And that is why we thought it would be nice to have you here. Now let's start maybe with you, Inno, since I already have you. When did you actually get into politics? Because you are actively in it now. You are actually occupying political positions in the ruling party and its youth league. So what drove you into politics, and around what time did you get into it?
Toivo, growing up, I've always been interested in how the world works.
Yes.
And as a young child growing up in the rural Kunene, I've always been interested in how are decisions made, and I mean, I would always question all these wars and stuff that I see on TV.
Yeah.
You know, why are people fighting each other? I mean, who's causing all these wars? And I started to make it a point to understand, how does the world work? How are policies formulated? How can an individual influence what happens in the world and what shapes the economy and the landscape of a country? So that's how I, because of my keen interest, got into politics. I actively registered for the Youth League in 2009 when I came for university. And then from there, I've not really been active. I've just been in the background. But then where I started to completely get involved and active was in 2015. And yeah, I started up from the bottom structures of the party until the position that I'm holding now.
Wonderful. Same question to you, Honorable Hengari. How did you get into that space?
You know, funny enough, Toyo, I've always struggled to answer that question. Because I think for me, it took a while to actually understand why, or the why of why I'm here, and when it started really. But I think probably a few months ago, as I was having a conversation with a friend, I realized that because of my history in terms of where I schooled and the circumstances around the school itself,
yeah.
I found myself wanting to understand why the setup was the way that it was. And I'm particularly referring to the fact that I went to a predominantly white school. And so most of the things that were taught in history class, like racial segregation, for us was lived. For me, it was a lived experience. Even though it was very subtle and very quiet, I think I also experienced, racial segregation in terms of, you would come to our school during break time, and the setup was such that on the one side of the school, you would find all the white kids, all the white learners on the one side of the school. And on the other side of the school were all the black kids, And so I think it really stems from wanting to understand why that was our reality, especially the young people, the young black kids from rural homes, from poor and middle class homes. And really just trying to understand why there was a difference in treatment between, how teachers also treated white kids and why it was different for a black child, and so forth. And also, I think that racial segregation and that difference in treatment was not just in terms of who sat where or who was hanging around which places in the school premises, but who took part in sports, for example, who took part in debate, for example. And so it was really a pattern that was present everywhere in terms of how the classes were divided. The A class for the white kids, the D class for the black kids. So it took a while for me to actually understand that, that's my why. That's why I wanted to understand why there's injustice and why this is done the way that it is done now. And I think I always sought to find an alternative way of doing things. Why is it that we can't do it this way? Why should we only stick to one stagnant way of doing things?
Wonderful. Dr. Nakuta, John, in your conversation with young people, and you are a teacher of law, you really teach perhaps one of the most vibrant students you can have in any school. What is the general attitude that they have towards politics as a concept, and without necessarily whether you are an active participant in politics as a member of a political party or participating in political processes?
I probably would be now very controversial.
Please be as controversial as you can.
But it's actually very sad,
yeah.
To be very honest. I had, and I'll give you a practical example. In April, I had a guest lecturer from Germany who was visiting Namibia, who's writing, for example, on the German, German colonialism.
Yes.
So he wrote a lot And his focus is mainly about that so many years after German colonialism, the monuments in Windhoek, in Swapo, you go, you see German history and heritage, without question. And also he's very interested in the issue of reparations. He asked my third-year law students, who amongst you have heard about the joint declaration currently under discussion between the German government and the Namibian government? Believe you me, out of a class of about 120 students, 6 raised their hands. For me, that was the most brutal shock. And that third-year law students are not aware of the joint declaration between the Namibian government and the German government. And that just shows me how little interest young people has about contemporary issues. And for me, that is shocking. And that is a reflection of young persons not being interested in things other than, I suppose, cell phones, bling bling, and all those things. And to me, that is a sad reality, because if we talk about the future, because in fact in 2020, last year, 2023, the international community adopted what they call the rights of future generations, saying basically that the current generation is and must be responsible for the future generations. And I'm just asking myself, are we not facing a serious, almost existential crisis if we are having young people that are so disinterested in the current issues, and what does that say about the future? So yes, it's quite scary for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that Dr. Nakuta just mentioned. I saw a video, I think one of the local newspapers was interviewing young people on the streets just when registration for voting started. And they went around asking young people, when are you registering? Did you register already? What are your feelings about this whole thing? And there was a 25-year-old woman. She said she's 25 years old in that video. And she said, I am not registering, I'm not voting because I don't know much about political parties in Namibia. And I saw people saying, oh, but political parties are not doing enough to really put themselves out there. Innocentia, is that really an excuse? I mean, look, if you do not know the ideologies of political parties, I can understand. That's a bit deeper. But to not know that there's a party like yours, Swapo, and just the basics about the parties, that cannot be blamed on political parties. What are your thoughts?
I think I saw the video as well, and it's one thing to ask, are you going to vote? But then it would have been another thing to find out, why are young people not interested in voting? Because that would have given us a true reflection of whether it's lack of information in terms of what the government is doing, or whether it's just based off of what they see on social media and what's being portrayed as the Namibian government in the media. Because usually media would not, I mean, I was a journalist myself, I was in the newsroom. So media does not really highlight the positives of what the government is doing. And there's so much that the government is doing for the young people. Obviously, there needs to be more that has to be done. And when it comes to access to information, that information is not readily out there for young people. There are opportunities, for example, skills training programs, funding opportunities that the government has brought in through the National Youth Service, the National Youth Council. The government has brought in these institutions to actually cater for the needs of the young people. But how accessible are the programs and how accessible is information, not only in the central government, but also on the grassroots?
Yeah.
For example, when there are grant applications going out, do the representatives of these organizations go out into the regions and give adequate access to information for all the young people?
Yeah.
Not only in the Windhoek space, because Windhoek and the central spaces, they've got social media, they've got the internet, they know about it. But there are young people in remote areas who don't have access to this information. And I think that's what's bringing the sentiments of young people towards saying that we don't know what the political parties are doing, we don't know that they are in existence.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of stuff that is there out there for young people that can actually benefit them.
Yeah.
But the only problem is the access to information. Timely information.
Yeah.
And I think that plays a critical role in the current perception that young people have regarding politics.
But do you think, just a follow-up on that, do you think, for example, that because politics is at the center of everything, of the everyday life, so as a newspaper editor myself, I do not always write about political rallies of parties. Sometimes I write about fuel price increase. It's a political decision. The price of bread, shops do not just stand up and say, mine is going to cost this much. They deduce their rates from some political decisions. The taxi fares. Why is it not of interest to young people to say, look, it's not about party colors and scarves around the necks. It's about the everyday life. If you're not interested in knowing who is behind your suffering or your excitement or your success as a citizen, that cannot be blamed on the media or anyone else.
No, for sure, it cannot be blamed on the media. I think you are right there. However, voter education or like young people understanding the power that their vote holds.
Yeah.
That is not there. And I think that should start also at home in the communities, and it should also be at school as well, to understand, to let young people understand that your vote can influence policy and decision making. Because right now, and I believe we'll also come to that, but young people make up majority of the country's population.
Yes.
I mean, the statistics from the just released prelim census showed us that. So as young people sitting here and also across the country, if you don't get involved in politics and if you don't let your voice be heard, the decisions are going to be made on your behalf. So it's important for you to also go out and seek that information yourself, acquaint yourself with how is the country governed, how can I play my part in the decision making of the country through getting involved. Because you cannot just wait for somebody to come and tell you, get involved in politics. Nobody is going to give you that space unless you give it to that space to yourself. And you will not only be doing it for yourselves, you will also be doing it for the future generations of the country.
Absolutely.
So yeah, make it a point. I always implore young people, make it a point to get involved. And you can start getting involved from a community level. Understand how the community works. Understand what the plight of the community is, where you are operating in. So that when you come into a space where you can sit on the table where decisions are being made, then you are making informed decisions. And it's not because of feelings and emotions, but you can actually say that I come from Okamatapati.
Yeah.
Our roads are not proper. We don't have adequate facilities for health care. Schools are not there. So you can influence that by coming. When you come in, you say, somebody says, no, let's build a road. You can, for example, say, no, let's start with something critical like a healthcare facility. And that's how you can influence policies and everyday lives of the people on the grassroots.
Absolutely. What we are reading in the papers, I think there was an article in the papers this week about election registration officials speaking at pains to explain why young people are actually not flocking. They are actually in the minority apparently in terms of the number of people who are showing up to register. It is said that the majority of those are sort of middle-aged and older people. And then once in a while, you see pockets of islands of young people coming along. Do you think that that is down strictly to issues of ignorance, as has been mentioned here, or there's an element of dissatisfaction that people do not see any prospects of change, even if they voted? They feel, because we are told, for example, that youth unemployment in particular is hovering just below 50%. That's a huge number. Is it maybe a case of people saying they don't feel that even if they voted, things will change? Or what do you think they are not showing up at the registration points?
Well, I think, Toivo, first, I'd like to debunk this thing that we like to throw around, that young people don't register to vote. If you look at the statistics, and I'm sitting with them here, from the last election, basically the Electoral Commission of Namibia has released from the last election, from the period of registration, the number of people that went to vote in their demographics. In 2014, I believe, those who were born before 1925, in 2014, were 8,000. In 2019, that number decreased to 5,000. Those who were born 1982 to 2001, because those voted in the last election. In 2014, there were 500,000. This is your young people, right? 500,000. In 2019, were 700,000 young people who went to register to vote. So maybe we need to draw a distinction between the registration process, those who go to register to vote, allowing themselves perhaps time to still decide which political party I'm going to vote for, but still have the intent to go and vote. That differentiation must be drawn, and those that actually show up on polling day, on the voting day. I think the biggest challenge that we have on our hands as political parties, and I speak even on behalf of the ruling party, is we've not found a way in which young people can feel a sense of belongingness to a political party. What happens is, so what you would see ordinarily is that the reason why we even have swing votes in this country is because one political party today will wake up and say, we are going to target the youth vote, and therefore, in this electoral cycle of 2024, we will run a strictly youth targeted programs or awareness programs. And it becomes temporary to a point where it ends the day that the election results come out. Why? Because the plans that we have, and that's the mistake that most of us make, the plans that we have for young people most of the time look temporary. They're not permanent. And therefore, young people, each time they see, oh, the Landless People's Organization is basically advocating for land. I think that's an interesting thing. Let's go there. The next time they see, oh, the Popular Democratic Movement is advocating for employment and jobs and an unemployment grant for all young people, they go and vote there. So I think to some extent, political parties have to take responsibility for the voter apathy, not the registration apathy. I have no doubt, in fact, that this year, young people will still go out in their numbers, whether it's last minute, the way they did was registering their SIM cards or not, but they will still be able to go out. The bigger picture is, what do we do to ensure that we build trust in political parties, to ensure that we build a sense of belonging for young people, where young people can actually feel at home and feel like this organization I belong to, because not because of the short-term projects or programs, but rather because of the long-term vision the organization holds for all of us and for the country, really. And I think it's a message that all political players must carry, to say, I just want you to get out of my house and go and register to vote. Who you vote for, that's on you, right? But you must inform yourself before you go and vote. The decision lies on you to decide which political party you're going to vote for. I want to agree with Inno on the point of civic education. In the US, for example, in other countries, even in Kenya, you would find that young people are taught in schools from a very primary level what a constitution is, what it outlines, what your rights are. I was surprised, John, the other day. I have a young nephew who is now in university, and this was at the beginning of the year, and we're getting him into university and so forth. The first assignment that they were given was to explain what a constitution was. And he came to me to ask, what is a constitution? What does that mean? And I really think it goes to say we need to introduce civic education at the lowest level of our education system so that we don't struggle. In fact, I always say financial literacy, civic education, as well as even young people getting some sort of exposure to driving lessons and so forth from a very, very foundational level. Instead of teaching young people, somebody who's 21, what is a constitution? They don't have an answer for it. Yeah. Really, I think it comes from there. It stems from there.
Yeah. John, the universities, by their very nature and traditionally, have always been the ground, the breeding ground for political consciousness. The student societies, the student representative councils, they have always, and even those that served. Did you serve in SRC?
Yes, I was vice president of the student representative council at UNAB.
Yes, so a lot of you end up in mainstream politics. Yes. But do you think, therefore, John, that in terms of that consciousness, that the universities and not only the schools, maybe schools at a different level, the university at least, must be the hive for that kind of consciousness to help actually boost the interest?
Of course, universities, is the place where critical thinking is supposed to be cultivated. Yeah, yeah. But of course, we would be naive to think that universities are islands on themselves. Universities are part of this bigger social fabric. Generally in our country, sad to say, that the liberty, the freedom to freely express yourself without fear, favor or prejudice, or even fear for retribution is very, very high. And I'll probably be on the wrong side saying it here, that at my university, or the place where I am, it's like there's a culture of fear.
Yes.
A culture of fear from both academics as well as of students, because they fear they would be victimized if they were to speak out and whatever. So unfortunately, our universities are not anymore the spaces where critical and robust debate used to take place. Now, I think you've also written about a week or two ago about some of the nonsensical, and I'm going to use the word nonsensical because it is, that you now need to decide as to who do you invite to become a guest speaker. In fact, one of the young MPs recently submitted a motion or table a question rather in the National Assembly to ask the Minister of Higher Education what has happened. Yeah. Is there a specific agenda to suppress free speech? And that to me is really, really a problem. And so whereas the universities are supposed to be places where critical debate and critical thinking is supposed to be cultivated, our university sadly is now concentrating on who's dressing how and whose hairstyle is what, instead of critical debating. It's really, really a sad thing, and I think it should be nipped in the bud by people that are not afraid to speak. Because I'm telling my students, with the adoption of the Namibian Constitution officially on the 21st of March 1990, we have moved from an era of authority to an era of justification, where the exercise of any power must be justified. Can't just decide, just because you are in a position of authority, you take the kind of a decision that you take. Yeah. So yes, we need to nip this thing that is taking place, and not just at the University of Namibia, but we've also read that some of the decisions taken at this very university where we are now having this kind of a discussion, it is antithetical to the kind of environment that a university is supposed to create. Absolutely. I agree. I think what happened at UNAM, and we read in the papers, and it was people like John who spoke out at the university to say, look, these hierarchical methods that are being created to discourage people, because now a person says, maybe it's a political students' society or whatever they are called these days. They just want to be addressed by a particular person whom they think they can tap, from whose wisdom they think they can tap. And they are told, no, the whole thing has to be, you have to write a letter, it has to be 14 days in advance, and then the letter must go to another person to essentially frustrate people so that they just do not even think of doing that. I mean, I was a university student myself, and during our time at UNAM, ironically, there was that robustness. You find the student representative body fighting, running battles with management. They do not see eye to eye on key things. The university will be on a standstill for a few days until consensus is reached. I think it's important. But now people are told that...
but I wanted to give an update on the questions that you're talking about. I actually posted the questions to the Minister of Higher Education. And since those questions were posted, the Minister has been absent in the House every Thursday. And I fully agree with you. I think it's that kind of behavior, autocratic behavior, and an exercise of authority that kills activism on campus. I think campus should be a place where students are able to advocate for things that they feel they deserve, where they can advocate for a space to express themselves. Because political parties can't visit primary schools. Yeah. We can't visit secondary schools. And so the only other arena where you can convince an adult who is of consenting age or who actually has a right and qualifies to express that right in a booth is at university. And so when you have management really then send out memorandums like that, I really think it should be called out, not only because we want to go and campaign on campus, but because if a university campus can appear can have a registration point, a voter registration point, why can't it be a site to have critical conversations? Why can't it be a site where people can actually debate and say, look, but I think your option of party is not better than mine, and this is why I think this line of thinking is better, and this is the vehicle that would take us to our destination.
Yeah. You know, so the 2023 population census results show that young people under the age of 35 constitute 71.1% of the country's population. That is a huge block of people. And that is just because our constitution actually defines young people to be from 35 and below. But I think if you go even, I consider myself still a young person in my own right. Yeah, I'm 41 years old. But so if you added people like myself in that group, the number will even be much higher. So how important is it to include this demographic, these young people, into decision making, into the development agenda of the country, to feel that their input is also counted, as opposed to this perceived firewall around key decisions, where you almost sometimes think that maybe older people seem to just advocate for things that speak to their own aspirations. For example, there's still a debate in the country about old age pension. You hear constantly about it must be increased to $3,000. But rarely do we hear about what exact plans are there for young people. Not these broad things like, oh, go to DBN. Or like I read in the papers this week, the Minister of Urban saying those who have graduated in engineering and all those technical things must set up factories. Those things, I don't know, man. So please go ahead and tell us how do we make sure that we do not create an impression that these people are excluded?
You know, it comes without saying that, 71.1%, it's extremely high. That's like more than half of the Namibian population that's actually young.
Yeah.
If you look at it, it's over 2.something million, 2.1.
3 million.
So the young people now, the 71.1%, if you put it into figure, it's like 2.1 million that are young people under the age of 35. So it's very important that these people are actually part of the decision making, because whatever decisions that are going to be made and are being made now are impacting the young people, the youth. So what better way for them to be involved in that process so that whatever decision is made is in the best interest of the young people, because they understand what the need is on the ground.
Yeah.
Unemployment is high. And yes, the government is saying, create your own jobs. But are there platforms? Obviously, there are policies, like you've said, on the ground that set out for funding for young people, young entrepreneurs and stuff like that. But how accessible are these projects or funding programs for young people? So that is what the government has to look at, the national government has to look at. And also, young people, how do we support them to become entrepreneurs? Because to start, like even some young people that want to do business do not even know how to construct a business plan, a solid business plan. Financial literacy. How viable is this business plan when I'm going to pitch it to the Ministry of Trade and Industry? And also when we say there are funding opportunities for young people, young business entrepreneurs, are those funding opportunities really going to cater for young people to set up industries like it's expected, for them to also create employment to help the government with the unemployment problem? Let's say there's a 50,000 grant that you get from Ministry of Trade and Industry, for example. How is that going to help your business in the long term? So we need to look at serious capital injection into funding programs and businesses for young people. And we need to also look at mentorship programs in order for them to also understand, if I start this business, what does it take for me to be able to run this business successfully? And we have got agreements that we have signed, such as the African Free Trade Agreement, for example. It's one of the agreements that can help young people to venture outside the Namibian borders and to trade on a regional level. But how informed are young people about this? And how is the government, through trade and through foreign affairs, assisting young people to be able to access these platforms and to also benefit from them? So it's not like young people do not want to do business. I mean, they are young, brilliant minds that have got great business ideas, but the government must just lay down solid foundations for these young people to be able to get funding and to be able to also carry out these business ideas. And in terms of involving them, these young in developmental plans, it's very important, it's critical. Because who are you putting up these plans for? It's for the young people. Because they are the future generation, and then the generation that comes after them. So without their involvement, you might miss critical aspects that could have been in those developmental plans, to say that when funding is done on the national budget level, for example, how much funding does Ministry of Trade and Industry get? Because that's where industries can be created from. It's a ministry that has been set up to also help in terms of entrepreneurship. So we need to look at those things and involve young people so that they can also air their views and say, this is where we see the gap, and this is how the government can meet us halfway to also assist us into becoming job creators instead of just being job seekers.
Yeah. As a Swapo foot soldier, I suppose I can refer to you as that, because you engage, you run around for the party. When you engage other comrades in the party, especially in times like this, where you have 8,000 graduate teachers unemployed at the moment, and those 8,000 are just teachers. If you go into other courses, your engineerings, your health, you might find even higher numbers there. So how do you advise your principals in the party and by extension in government, because of course the ruling party is also leading the government, on resolving some of these issues in a more pointed way? Because when people talk about, oh, go to DBN and access and apply for loans, you don't have collateral, you don't have a house to put up as a collateral, you don't have anything, and then it becomes just too broad. But in terms of pointed interventions, how is it difficult for you because obviously anything at the moment that doesn't go right, it will be blamed on the ruling party. And the ruling party will say, oh, look, we had COVID, we had drought, we had recession. But to a common young person, they just want their leaders to find solutions for their difficulties. Mm-hmm. So how do you speak to them as a young person who understands what is going on the ground?
To be honest with you, a young person, regardless of the political affiliation that you have, whatever affects the young person, it should be the plight of everybody, all the political parties. It should not just be the ruling party. And the good thing is that, through the engagements as comrades, as young people and with the elders and so on, the understanding is there, the acknowledgement is there. So yes, it might not be seen now, and I'm one person that says that sometimes we shy away from highlighting the successes. Obviously, not as the Swapo party, but as the national government of Namibia. There are successes, there are programs that have been tailored for young people. And the only thing hindering that is that mostly successes and the achievements are not highlighted. And also the other thing is the access to information. So sometimes those brilliant programs and policies are out there, but understanding those policies and also accessing them, because there are young people that have graduated through skills training from the National Youth Service, for example, in different trades. And when we have discussions, it's also a matter of how do we further empower these young people. So obviously changes and stuff will not happen immediately overnight. It needs to take everybody, not just the government, but also the private sector and also civil society and all that, to be able to fight the plight of the young people on the ground. We don't shy away from the need that's there. We openly address it. And the elders, if I would say through my engagements, are understanding and acknowledging that there is more that needs to be done for the young people. But as young people, we also need to come to the table so that we also air our voices and correct where we see that, no, this is not our situation on the ground. This is how you can serve us better. So that open dialogue is there. Of course, more needs to be done. And but it's also important that we take part in community development and volunteerism as young people, because that will also give us an understanding of what is really on the ground. And if our needs are not met, where are the offices that we can go to? Where can we go demand for answers and so on?
Okay.
But the open dialogue is there, the acknowledgement is there. So let's see in the future what happens.
Wonderful. John, I see you are taking some notes there. Is there a particular point that you want to respond to?
Yeah, I wanted to also add to the issue of youth participation.
Yeah.
And I have my notice actually directed to the parliamentarian, if you don't mind. How do we get young people more involved? Remember, as academics, we are we are paid to read, to write, and to research. I came across a very useful opinion ad saying that if it is true what we've been told by the Namibia Statistic, what is it?
Agency.
NSA, that indeed the young people constitute about 71%. Is it not time to have a review then of the youth, of the voting age? In terms of our constitution, our voting age is set as a threshold at 18 years.
Yes.
Meanwhile, countries like Malta, Germany, and others have reduced their voting age from 18 to 16. The reason is, if it is that you are dealing with such a high number of young people, make the circle bigger, because with the kind of things that she's talking about, if you've got more young people voting, registering, we can rest assured that there would be much more young people going into the higher tables of decision making. In fact, countries, like as I said, Malta and Germany reduced it to 16, and countries like Greece reduce 18 to 17%. And I'm just saying, why not? And I'm not going to go into the benefits of doing this, but one of the benefits, the direct benefits, one, it won't cost that much. Yes, there would be financial implications in terms of you probably will have to put up much more voting stations and polling booths and whatever. But overall, the cost-benefit analysis, we will be having a much more inclusive, democratic society that would ensure that decision-making is much more focus-oriented, because you will be having young people that are much more in parliament and so forth. So that would be one thing. Maybe a constitutional amendment, and maybe I'm unrealistic, but I think this is, if we need to take care of this high number of young people, then surely why not doing it? Another way of ensuring greater youth voices. I want to make another proposal for a constitutional amendment. And I'm taking cue from what has happened in Zimbabwe, what has happened in Kenya, what has happened in Burundi, and I dare say even Uganda, I'm not so sure. They have, in our constitution, the president is having the prerogative to appoint, it used to be 8, it is still 8. But the president decides by him or herself to appoint these 8 people without consulting anyone. In Zimbabwe, in Kenya, in these countries that I've mentioned, they are saying we've got 10 seats allocated to very specific vulnerable populations. Women, that they've got quotas built into their constitution. Women, young people, people with disabilities, and in Kenya, even indigenous communities. So as to ensure that the voices of these constituencies are heard. And I'm asking myself, why can't we do the same? And what happened basically in these countries, and I know in 2013, I was in Zimbabwe when they had their constitution, and I mean their elections. Very nicely, shortly after the elections, they would then convene what they call a youth convention or electoral college, where young people from across the country would nominate, delegate to this electoral, whatever you want to call it, youth electoral something convention, and they amongst themselves, across their political affiliations and formation, would nominate however number the quota is. And I'm saying, if we really want to do justice to the notion that young people constitute 71% of our population, then we should amend the Constitution to bring in quotas for young people, for women, people with disabilities, and indigenous communities like the San, the Ovahimba, and the Ovatwe. So that would be ensuring that those critical voices are also heard at the various platforms where it matters.
Wonderful.
And I
Yes?
think, Trevor, to add to that, it's also important that if something like that has been, the Constitution has been amended, and young people also need to look at, because we must look at credible young people.
Yeah.
Young people that understand and are going to deliver. Because it should not be on popularity, it should not be on because you are a young person.
Yes.
But we have a lot of young people who are capable of leadership, of running and taking part in leadership positions. They are out there. But it should also be in a way that those that are out there and that are not, they are doing so much in the background, they are not on the forefront, those ones should also get an opportunity. And like the vulnerable groups, for example, it shouldn't just be a thing of forerunner, young people that are forerunners, whether whichever political party it is, not just the Swapo party, but also the other political parties. Because you have young people with capabilities, knowledgeable, and that can do a brilliant job, but because they are not seen in the forefront, and I think that type of conferences where young people can gather and then make nominations and elections among themselves would work. But also, how do you get seen as a young person also in terms of the work that you are doing? Get involved in community programs, for example. Yeah. When there is a town hall meeting and where there are consultations, go there, understand what is being talked about. Green hydrogen consultations, for example. What is green hydrogen? How can I play my part? And it's being said that young people are going to benefit from it. But do the young people understand on how they can benefit from it? And how can they, through these consultations, also advise the government in terms of what can be done to cater for the young people on the ground? So we need to look at young people that are capable and that also have the plight of the community at heart, and not just for enrichment and also for self-gratification. But it must really be cadres that are on the ground, that understand the needs of those that are on the ground in the community they are serving, so that when they go into those structures, they know that I'm here for a purpose and I'm here to serve my people.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So we'll be engaging our audience in a moment, in case they want to speak to us, ask questions. But before that, perhaps my last question to the panel, it goes to you, Inna. You are under 30 years old. Yes. I saw someone saying, happy 28th birthday, just not too long ago.
Yeah, I'm 28.
and that is great. Do you think that, because in your case, I suspect that it was an organic rise.
Yep.
It was not you were not picked by anyone to go to parliament. You rose through the party ranks, defeated young and older people on principles and ideas that you are perceived to possess. And when you look at our parliament at the moment, there's a few of you now that are young. From the ruling party, there's Honorable Emma Teofeles, and then Patience Maswa. Those were sort of handpicked by the president as per his prerogative to bring them in. I don't know much about Utara Motu of LPM. I suppose she also just came through the same system as yourself. Do you think that political parties must be a bit more deliberate in making sure that the passage of young people towards parliament and other critical positions is, as they call it in Swapo, the guided democracy? Or do you think that young people must be left to their own devices and battle it out on their own? Just briefly before we speak to the audience.
I don't know whether I'll be able to be brief.
Please talk to me.
Because I don't think it's a simple yes or no answer.
Yes.
But I think I want to comment on what John said and what he proposed. I'm a proponent of democracy. I fully agree with the ideals and principles of democracy. But one of the downfalls of democracy is that in situations where you put something to a vote, popularity always wins, right? Because majority governs. And I think it's one of the biggest challenges in a democracy, especially where you want to get things right and you want to do things the right way for the right reasons. Two, your proposal would work if we also impose a retirement age for politicians. Do you know that Toivo, as an MP myself, I serve one term and I'm entitled to a lifetime salary, even if I don't come back to parliament. Somebody comes,
I didn't know that.
Serves for 2 terms, then they are paid a certain quota of your salary for the rest of your life, even if you don't come back for a 3rd term. Yeah. I think, of course, there were reasons and intentions behind that, right? One being that as you come from an opposition party, standing in front of a Minister of Finance or calling out a Director General of the Anti-Corruption Commission, the likelihood that you would get employed after your political office is very low. The chances of you getting employed ever by a public institution or the Anti-Corruption Commission, are very low. So I think those rules were put in place to the detriment, however, of young people. And here's why I say so. I mean, look, it's the first time that we are having young people in parliament who are under the age of, by the time of entry, at entry time, below the age of 25, right? Now, that policy only catered for individuals for the rest of their lives because they were already at the sunset of their lives, So this is a 60-year-old or 70-year-old that serves probably 2 terms. That's why there was that sort of guarantee. But I imagine somebody who comes in 25 in 2019 or 23 in 2019, 5 years later, 28, right? Being told that it's unsustainable, this cannot apply to you. So I think at a deeper level, quotas will help, yes, but I think to a large extent, when you put it to a vote, it becomes a popularity test. And it almost becomes an exercise to just tick the box to have a young person there. I think that's why she's alluding to capacity and the ability to lead, but also beyond that, the ability to speak up on issues that affect the ordinary young person. I wanted to talk about, and I'm sorry, I'll respond to your question. It's right at the back of my head. But in terms of the projects that government has carried out thus far, yes, there have been projects. But our argument is that the quantity of projects do not cater to the size of the young people, the size of that youth demographic, that youth block. And so ordinarily, any person who understands economics, for example, would understand that TPEC, for example, when it was brought under the administration of the former president, Ifike Punye Pohamba, the NHE, the National Housing Enterprises, the mass housing program, when those projects were introduced and brought forward under the administration of former President Pohamba, it was really to benefit those young unemployed people. Why? Because your mass capital projects ordinarily are supposed to employ your young people from vocational training centers. Ordinarily are also supposed to employ those who come from university with your engineering or civil engineering degree and so forth. So we did miss out, I think, and we keep on missing out on opportunities to genuinely create employment. If you look at the report of the National Youth Council, and you also look at the report of the National Youth Service. It's a conversation we're having during the budget debate. The programs, the only programs these guys have been able to carry out, one was to get young people into charcoal businesses. Basically, they go take these young people and they deal with charcoal and a government project that deals with charcoal and so forth. The other was these young people will come from the National Youth Service and be trained to become security guards. So our question ordinarily, anybody would ask, is it true really that the youth population of our country can only do business in charcoal, can only be security officers? Or are we really making huge mistakes to the detriment of this very huge population demographic or youth block? On your question on how do we bridge that gap between the young people and what is happening now and how they can get involved? Look, I think that one, young people must decide what they want. Any young person and every young person in this country must sit down and ask, am I okay with the education system? Do I have access to healthcare, proper access to healthcare? Am I satisfied with the economy? Do you know, Toivo, and I'm just about to finish now, do you know, as it is now, we don't have a law that regulates rent. Last year, in fact, the Minister of Justice came to Parliament, and she came with a long list of basically obsolete laws. These are laws that we're going to repeal. One of those laws is called the Rent Ordinance Act. Basically, it's of 1977. That law basically made for the provision of the establishment of a rent control board, all this, basically to regulate and guide how disputes between somebody who is renting and somebody who is a landlord, right? As it stands, the only thing that guides a relationship between a tenant and a landlord is the lease agreement. So there's no way you can go and say, listen, I don't think so-and-so provision of my lease is constitutional or it protects me. I don't have a place, or those tenants actually don't have a place where they can say, listen, I paid a deposit. Ordinarily, that Rent Ordinance Act actually stipulated that when you pay your deposit, your monthly deposit before you move into a place, it is actually supposed to be stored somewhere where it grows in interest. How many of our young people today actually get their deposits even in return when they are moving out? How many of those deposits grow in interest, when they move out? So there are a lot of conversations in this country that must be had, but there's a question that all of us must answer as young people. Am I satisfied with the current conditions in my country where it is difficult to get a job, it is difficult to rent, and even when you rent, you still are exploited in one way or the other? And I think if one is able to answer those questions, then it's easier for you to sit down and say, which political party, which I think political parties must be looked at as vehicles that one can take to reach a particular destination. Which vehicle can I go for? Which taxi can I take to get me to Havana Four-Way? Can PDM as a taxi carry me to my destination, or can it not? Then perhaps we'll be able to say, okay, I think I'm going to vote for this political party.
Wonderful. Yeah, we will now engage our audience here. I just need to remind our viewers at home that we are coming live from the International University of Management, and we are grateful to the university for giving us a free venue at no cost. I just need to clarify that the views that are expressed here are not necessarily those of the university, but we are grateful to IUM for granting us this opportunity. And those that are watching from home, you can also post your questions in the comments of this stream so that we can see if we can accommodate you. Now, in the audience, if there's anyone with a question, we have a mic somewhere. Raise your hand, make it a question. We'll be grateful if it's just a question instead of a comment, so that we, in the interest of time, we do not give speeches rather. But yeah, please introduce yourself, sir, and tell us what you have on your mind.
Okay. Good evening.
Evening, sir.
I'll be brief and I'll ask 3 questions.
Yeah, if you can just speak a bit loud, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the side.
Maybe you can introduce yourself first, if you don't mind.
Okay. I'm Philemon Nakale. I'm a TVET practitioner.
Okay.
I'm a recent graduate from NAST also.
Okay.
Inna Hengari, I'm great that we have youth in the parliament. But my question to you, do you put politics aside as young people in parliament, and then you come together like 5 or 4 of you who are in parliament, and you do reflections on what you did? Just even 6 years, even after 6 months, and then you do the reflection. What did I contribute? Or I'm just a taxpayer corrector. Most of you, when you're in the parliament, you are taxpayer correctors. The only last time I saw you engaging each other in the parliament is when Mr. Dianda was telling you that every politician, I mean every woman that is married is subjected to rape. That's the only time you engage yourself, whereby I see Pasha, Anna, Emma, and you, and Kachmune. You're engaging each other because it's affecting, it seems like it's affecting the youth, but it's a reality of life. Do you take time and reflect, put politics aside, and then you do the reflection. What did you contribute? What did I do? What did I do? I'm on the taxpayer ticket. Did I do something? Because if you don't put politics aside, an ego will not go ahead. Okay. Because when you are in the parliament, you are ahead of us. Mr. Johnny, if the youth that we are already having, the one that are from 18 to 35, they are not going to polling station to register. If we bring the young one, will they do something? If there is no conducive environment and people they don't understand why they are voting, even if you add numbers, it will just make it waste and waste the government resources, the rates we have. Okay, to the lady from the youth department or from the Swapo. Most of people that are in parliament or that I know that get opportunities to serve us, they hire us. And then they are consuming us. Or let me say, we give hyenas the opportunity to take care of goats. And goats, when they are consumed, we wonder why. Why I'm saying that? The minister of our Utoni, who was there that day, at UIS, she was there for a different purpose, but she only finds herself that there's an industry of mining that's taking place. And then she said, youth must create employment. The one that served in parliament for a long time, why they can't create employment so that we join them? But they want youth to create something for battery. While we know, I was working at Swapo Uranium. Mining is not belong to us. Or it's not belong to us. Everything is exported from Valvage by port to China. China's people, they are creating batteries, they are doing everything. But here, how will we do it? And then the other things I saw is that when people get rid of TPEC, NAG, housing, mass, and what, is because there were no clear platform, or people, they don't see the use. People are still unemployed, but we have mass houses. People are still unemployed, people are still not getting houses, but we still have masses.
I think you have
okay,
your point clear. Thank you, brother.
Thank you again, Andy.
Yeah. Okay, there's another question there. We can start, so we'll take 3 people for now, then we'll do the last round. Yeah, give it to the gentleman behind you.
I have a question. Can I?
You have a question yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay.
Again, let's be just to the point, concise and to the point.
Good evening. I'm Beth Makamakali. I'm a civic leader. It's not really a question, it's just a contribution when it comes to youth interest in voting, as well as registering for voters' cards. Yeah, I think ECN is not doing enough to ensure that youth are interested in becoming eligible electorates. So I am saying this because I think the ECN is more focused on, they are more focused on administration instead of being innovative and creative to see what should we do. ECN has been there for years, and at least they have now more data to analyze and see why youth are always not coming up to register and why youth are not always voting, just to see what should we do, in which way, which strategy should we put into place to ensure that at least youth vote, register to have to be eligible to vote. For example, if ECN could put even a 50 Namibian dollars there, that once you register, you get your super away airtime. Youth will come and register. So I'm just saying the ECN should be creative enough and be innovative enough in a way that they will come up with a project or initiative that are attracting youth to come and register. Thanks so much.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, so we'll take these three gentlemen, then we do another round once the panelists have answered. Please go ahead, sir. Introduce yourself and go ahead.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Rich Kemsep. I'm the SRC of academics here at IUM. Okay, before the question, I want to say thank you to Ms. Hengari. I honestly wanted to see you, just used to see you on television. Okay, my question is directed to Ms. Innocentia. You mentioned a statement that really attracted my attention, which was decisions should be made in the best interest of the young people. But I don't fully agree with that statement. I think we are lacking somewhere. Because recently there was also an education circular 3 of 2019 that was updated, whereby it wasn't in the best interest of all the institutions, like one of them is IUM. It was affecting our students and on groups, like they were just going on. But later on, they suspended that policy. But in the future, I advise that these ministries should engage the student unions or the student leaders so that the decisions should be made in the best interest of us. They should hear our point of view rather than just doing things on their own. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You can, Esther can ask the question, because since some of those were just comments, I think we can accommodate a question or another comment.
Okay, thank you. My name is Esther Mbanga Ngipandulwa. I'm a lawyer by profession. Dr. John Nakuta is my former lecturer.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. So I just wanted to ask, especially with regards to platforms where young people can engage and contribute to the development of the country. I have observed that most of the platforms that are available are, for example, Facebook, Instagram, where people are just busy insulting each other. And it's very discouraging as a young person for me to participate in that kind of politics. So I just want to ask the youth leaders, what can you do to create platforms where youth can engage intellectually, not where we call out each other's wigs and past and private lives and all those kind of stuff, but where we can argue about the Constitution, where we can talk about solutions for the young people. What can you do to create these platforms for young people? And as I say this, I also ask how, as leaders, you can encourage reading in our people. Because the debates that you find our young people having, it's based on corridor news, and it's never really based on documents that they have read. And it's very difficult to participate in that kind of politics. So how can we encourage our youth to participate in intellectual debates, and how can we create those platforms? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we'll go to the panelists to address those questions, and then we'll take the last round in the interest of time, the last round of questions. John, you were quiet for some time. The ladies have taken the lead, but please, if you can. It's a youth discussion. Yeah. You gave them their space. Yeah, please go ahead.
There was one question directed to me about the proposal to lower the voting age. I would want to refer you to something that I want you to go and read. It's called Youth and Elections, Shaping the Future, Shaping the EU's Future. It is an op-ed of the 6th of March this year. And I found it very, very interesting. Knowing that as for Africa is having, what is the goal? 2063. Agenda
2063. Yeah.
2063. So this is not just for the immediate. This is really futuristic. If we really want a better future, because, and that op-ed, for example, mentioned a whole range of benefits for reducing the voting age. And I'll just mention, I've already mentioned one, but I'll add two more. The first one was ensuring a future-focused decision-making. Decisions that would benefit the young people as opposed to older people. We just heard here, and I really don't know whether it's true, that MPs are getting a lifelong salary in the face of unemployment. Young people were not involved. The very same MPs are against the introduction of a basic income grant. And yet they agreed to give themselves, as the moment they set foot into Parliament, they will get lifelong salaries. Imagine someone is as young as 25, you are lucky, you are now elected into Parliament, you live for the next 60 years, you will get a lifelong salary. I mean, honestly, is this sustainable? Is this in the interest of the country? Is it not selfish for our MPs to have ever made such a law? And I really hope it is not the case. I really hope we talk about pensions and not salaries. Because if it's a pension, then it's something different. So bringing young people into these spaces where this kind of decisions, that would be the ultimate benefit. And lastly, it talks about intergenerational solidarity, where decisions would be taken that don't just benefit the older generation, but it also benefit the younger generation. And that's really, so I want you to go and read that op-ed. It's not my ideas, but I said, wow. And it made me think, and it's really something worth considering for the future. Wonderful. That was my only question.
Wonderful. You know?
I think coming to decisions made in Parliament, as well as also like the mining sector or the natural resources that the country has that are not beneficial to the country. And this is one of the, and I'm glad you raised it, because this is where the importance of your involvement in voting and taking part in the political affairs of the country plays a role. Because as a young person sitting there, you know that the natural resources, certain agreements do not really benefit the country and the citizens. So once the involvement is there of the young people in politics as the future leaders, you sitting here and everybody else at home watching, us included, will then be able to stand together, not as political parties, but also as a national youth platform to say that this is not in the best interest of the country. How can we read the fine print, and how can we advise in terms of how these contracts are being signed so that the communities where these mines are or where these natural resources are can also benefit. So that is the critical element of getting involved in politics, because those are the decisions that are being made, and what happens in the future. Next thing, we sit without mines, for example, that are all foreign owned, but you could have played a part in ensuring that that doesn't happen. So yeah, it's a good observation that you have made. Get involved and be part of this decision. Even when consultations and community consultations are being done, go to those town hall meetings. It's not for, like, it's not in vain. Once you go and sit in those town hall meetings and you understand and you hear something that you don't agree with, then you can raise your voice and say, but this doesn't make sense. How is the community benefiting? How are the young people, how are people with disabilities, living with disabilities benefiting? So you can make that call. You can influence that decision. The other thing was decisions made in the best interest of the youth. I think some way you kind of misunderstood me. What I'm saying is that whenever decisions are being made, young people should be involved in the decision making, and their plight should be taken into account. And that circular that you are talking about, I mean, that also serviced, and once we got it, I'm also the one that shared it on the Commerce Regional Executive for the ruling party. We debated on it, and it obviously reached the structures, and there is an understanding that no consultation was done. And no one is happy about that, because parents invested money into those studies, learners invested, the students invested their time. Do you understand? So there are things that are happening in the background, and we do, like politicians or leaders do not actually turn a blind eye to those things, because it's very important that we cater for the needs of the young people, and even for the ruling party, that catering for the needs of the youth, it's in the forefront. But also, as young people that are in the spaces, we also question, and we also give recommendations. And some of those recommendations then are taken into decision making. So not all is lost. Bring more voices, bring more young people on, come on board as young people. And then platforms where young people can engage, especially on political debates, and debates that actually influence their everyday lives. It's true. Social media, I mean, is a powerful platform where info sharing can happen at a rapid pace. I mean, in this technology age, but you are right. The discussion points that happen there, and young people, when they engage into discussions, do not actually acquaint themselves with the facts on the ground. They don't read up, and they jump on the bandwagon of Inno that said, no, but this is what, and without even understanding and questioning. And one thing I've also seen is that false information being circulated on WhatsApp groups and on social media. It is your responsibility to make sure that whatever you share is accurate, you have done your research, so that you can also inform and educate each other. But I feel the community groups and also universities and schools are great platforms. I mean, I've heard that there were some limitations where open debates cannot take place at university, but actually these are the platforms where young people, regardless of their political affiliation, can come together and share ideas for the benefit of the entire nation, and not just say, I'm from this political party, I'm from this political party, but to join as young people for the plight of the entire nation. So I believe the schools must encourage that, universities must encourage that, community groups must also encourage that. In terms of incentives for voters, I don't know how that's going to work. I think voter education is key, and you are right. ECN, the voter education under the Electoral Commission is not really that in-depth for young people to understand, what does my vote mean? Why should I go and vote? Because it says your vote counts. So what is the meaning of your vote counts? And how can young people, especially those that do not know, and it's not only young people, hey, it's also people that are young adults who are saying that, I this afternoon had a discussion where I said, did you go register to vote? I said, I'm not gonna vote because my vote will not make a difference. But one vote can be very powerful. So,
There was a very interesting scenario that happened, I don't know in which election, but one of the recent elections in one of the constituencies in Commerce, where the difference
it was Windhoek West.
was one vote only, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Only one vote separated two political parties. Imagine if just two more people had voted in favor of one of the two parties, then the difference would have been massive. So it's a huge thing. Yeah, thank you, Inno, for that.
Yeah, I hope I answered. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you did justice to that.
Okay.
So, Inna, if you can just focus on what has not been touched on, that was more directed to you.
I think people mistake Parliament to just be, and limit Parliament to just what happens, what you see happen on TV. I think, but there's so much more that happens in Parliament, right? In fact, how many of you guys here watch Parliament on a day-to-day basis? But beyond that, not just the National Assembly, National Council as well, because those houses, both of them make up your legislature arm of government. So definitely, there's so much more that happens beyond, the debate that happens in the chamber. That is what we usually broadcast on our Facebook page or on NBC. There have been a lot of conversations between myself, the Honorable Masua, the Honorable Motu, and other young people, even from my own party, about coming up with what we call a youth caucus. Basically, a formalized structure where lawmakers of the House who are below the age of 45, we're not going with 35 because of the AU limitations, which considers 45 also. IPU, sorry, not AU. You're still a young person according to the Interparliamentary Union standards, because you're not 45 yet. But the idea really is to build consensus beyond political party lines. It's unfortunate that the last debate that you watched was when we're talking about rape in marriages, because I believe that debate took place last year at the beginning. There's so much more, I guarantee you, that has happened in the House. There are so many more conversations that are truly, truly encouraging, that have also happened and are taking place in the House. Of course, consensus is always built, Let me tell you, Parliament is a house of politics. When we enter Parliament, we enter and serve at the behest of our political parties, because we are sent there by political organizations. So sometimes there are also limitations in terms of your perimeter of operation, right? There are certain things your political party expects you to advocate for, and there are certain limitations also in terms of how you engage. And this is a fact, and it's a reality for many young people in some political parties. And so, of course, we have devised very colorful ways of engaging and building consensus without putting anyone's job on the line and putting somebody in a place where they are going to be withdrawn from Parliament because of their association to the opposition, or because they are seen with Inna in the restaurant or cafeteria having lunch every other day. So of course those strategies and mechanisms are there. Of course, even when I brought my motion on youth unemployment in 2021 towards, I think 2021 towards the end, you saw how it was not just supported by the opposition alone, but also the ruling party. Young people from the ruling party also said, look, this is our motion, this is not an Inna Hengari motion. And so that's the culture that we've sort of inculcated as well in Parliament, in terms of just getting everybody on board. Because in the end, when you don't have numbers, Toivo, you must be creative enough to convince the next person why they need to support a certain motion or a certain bill in the House. And one of those things is just to ensure that you depoliticize the work that you bring to Parliament, so that it is not to promote a certain political narrative or political party, but rather to the interest of those that voted for all of us to be there in that House. In terms of platforms for engagement, And I'll be very fast. What I've really tried in the last 4 years has been to have a very active social media platform. We ran for about a good 2.5 years, we ran what we call #YouthTalkNamibia. And this platform was on X, what was called Twitter back then. But one of the ideas was to say, instead of just having conversations in the air, right? This one comes and says, well, Swapo is not doing this, or oppositions are also just the same, you know. We decided to also make it a platform where young business owners would come and explain, as a young entrepreneur, because I remember it was during the time we were having a conversation about how young people must create their own jobs. So I thought, why don't we use those young people who are already running their small and medium enterprises, their small cooker shops, and use them as some sort of model to inspire other young people and to also inform and create awareness in terms of opportunities that are available to them. And I think it worked incredibly well. Going forward, however, I do intend on formally establishing a foundation that strictly focuses on civic education, because I don't think political parties alone can do the job, or ECN alone can do the job of educating young people in this country on the importance of a vote.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You also used your social media account to provoke people in South Africa.
Look, Toivo, when that debate on
You
load
brought for
shedding,
us, as young people say.
I
You brought for
apologize
us.
on behalf, on your behalf. And I think one of the things that people must always understand is that when you are an opposition leader in a country, right? Because countries are not islands. We don't live in isolation. We don't exist in isolation, right? So each and every person on this African continent that is ours must also have a say. When Julius Malema is failing next door, Cyril Ramaphosa, whose ANC is sister to Swapo here in Namibia, we must also have a say and say, look, I don't think these guys are doing so well, and therefore, colleagues, let's not fall into the same trap, really.
Yeah, no, that is just yeah. So, in the interest of time, 2 questions only now. We'll do two. Let's be as brief as we can so that we can wrap up this exciting conversation. We have, oh yeah, okay. So the SRC president, let's give it to her first, since ladies first, and then a gentleman, a true gentleman will close off.
Hello, okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for choosing IUM. My name is Loide Ngulondo, and I'm the SRC president of IUM, all campuses. My first question, I have 3 questions, but the first one is directed to Dr. Dumba. And
Dr. Nakuta.
Oh, sorry.
Dr. Ndumba has bailed out, and okay. Dr. Nakuta was very gracious enough to come in for us.
So my question is very personal, because there is something that you said that really spoke to me as a young aspiring leader. You talked about the liberty and the freedom of young leaders and also students on campus or just in general, being questioned and also limited to really expressing themselves. My question is, as an experienced individual in that field, what is your advice to young people who are aspiring leaders that are living in fear of being victimized? And also we have what we call the cancel culture in our generation, the Gen Zs. So whenever you speak out against certain issues that you are not comfortable with, people want to cancel you because they do not maybe feel like it's necessary or it doesn't align with them. But some of these issues are really pressing and they are affecting people. And even on campus, sometimes we are scared to always challenge management, and that is true. Leadership is no longer the way it used to be, like the time of Kachimune them, and I remember the guy from UNAM that's no longer in the country, I think Zambia, the other guy, I forgot his name. We grew up looking up to these people, but things are not the same anymore because we are even being threatened to not get employment when we are on social media. I'm speaking from a very personal point of view because I am experiencing this as a young person. So what is your advice, and what do you think the government can do to actually protect aspiring young leaders in that aspect? And the second question is directed to Ms. Innocentia. What is the ruling party doing to curb the negative impact of corruption towards the mindset of young people and the perception that it creates when it comes to things like politics, such as voting? Because if we are being honest, if we really want to also tackle the issue of young people not having interest in politics, it's things like corruption. Young people are reading the news. We read the headlines. We see what is going on. So why should I be motivated to go and vote when we are voting for people whose interest is really just about themselves and their children? So what is the ruling party doing to actually assist or motivate young people to be encouraged? That is the question that I'm having. The third one is directed to Ms. Inna. Do you think the reluctance of the government or the leaders that are in power towards the bill, the rent bill, has a relationship with the fact that the majority of these properties are owned by elites, which draws down to the fact that for them to implement this bill, it means it's also affecting their bread, for them to be able to take their kids abroad to go and study while we are just here. So what action plan do you have in plan to make sure that they do not ignore this rent bill? And what do you want us young people and young leaders to do for you to make sure that this rent bill actually comes into, it prospers? Because as an SRC president, we are suffering. Our students are just behind here, Dorado. One house, one room, there are 3 bedrooms inside, and the person is paying $2,000. Yes. What do you want us young leaders from different universities to do to help you? This is a question so that I can also follow up via your DM and X, because I'm a big fan of yours, and then we'll take it up from there. Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's give the gentleman a chance. Just introduce yourself, say, and then again be as short as you can.
Okay, thank you. Is it better if I stand up as a young person?
Yes, please.
Okay, my name is Leonard Andreas from Roshpina, Karas region. I came to delegate our region here. Yeah, the theme of today is why the youth must participate in voting or maybe to register for the vote cards. Now, the program said there that the youth must go vote, must go register. But again, they don't know why, if once we register, what is the reason for us to register? Again, this is the thing, the government. I'm talking now, even you, Ms. Hengari, you are there. You are there for the House of Politics there. These are the things. Even if you are on the PDM, you must support again the government at the position where they are doing good things. We must not just be there because of the political, because it's the one which sent you. You must be on the heart of the Namibian people again. That once we vote, we are going to have this program and this and this and this and this and this. Again, if I'm coming here to the responsibility, I think this thing is broadcasted, and I would like to highlight it since I'm a youth empower and developer. To the youth, maybe again, who are watching on us, as youth, we need to volunteer ourselves. We need to adhere to the responsibility that we have to contribute to the community or to the society we are in touch. We must not be in the comfort of zone. You are claiming that, okay, I'm going to IAM, I'm going to be the doctorate. Do you want only to be an employee? Or at least you want to be an employer? That is the thing we need to adhere so that we can sustain the development of the country. Let's not go study to be an employee. At least we must go study to be an employer so that we can reduce the number of unemployment here in our country. When it's coming again to the taxpayer, once, especially as the youth, once we vote, We can give this submission like maybe if you are in the mining industry and all the time you used to pay the tax. These are the things you need to implement like the taxpayer, once they get even retired, are not retired like resigned. Resign, you had been already investing. Because if you are paying the taxes, it's like critically, it's like you are doing a certain investment, but once you lose your job, you never get return in your tax anymore. You're exchanging your energy with the taxi, but once you lose the job, even the taxi, it will forget you. And even the government, it will forget you. These are the things we need to implement. Once the youth come together to vote, these are the things we need to submit so that once you lose your job, at least maybe 50% of your salary, it can come back home where you are just sitting in your comfort zone. And again,
briefly now, if you have one last point, just sum it up for us. Thank you. Just sum it up.
Say it again.
I'm saying just sum up your last point.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Again, to the social media. Social media here, especially when it's coming to the voting, according to the campaigning, because now the young people, they are not having their own anymore, they are confused. Because this person is promising this and this, and this is promising and this and this. At least as they use, we must do the proper research. Proper research on, do these things are for good for the country, or it's just because the person maybe just want the votes to be in the position of leadership, why he don't know how to adhere to sustain the country. And again, we need to do the critical assessment, especially to our leadership in the political house there. We need to assess each other. To assess that, okay, your responsibility was supposed to be like this and this, according to the youth side. Have you done this and this and this? Then again, you believe back to the youth that we were having this program and we failed because of this and this. Then from there, we can correct it again. I want, as Namibian, to say the name of Namibia in a proper and in a conducive manner, in all over Africa. Thank you, I submit.
Thank you, Andreas, for your comments. Yeah, at least you didn't have a question, but we take note of your comments. John, you were the last one to speak. First one to speak the previous time. You can again go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I had only one question, and that was, how do we break the cycle of fear, if I'm correct?
Yes.
And also of intimidation. During my student years, when I was socialized, and I'm not going to say when, when was that? Shortly before independence, at least, there was the saying that freedom is never handed down from above on a silver platter. It is always demanded from below. Our independence didn't just come because the colonial South African apartheid regime so graciously handed down our freedom. So one, there's also a nice saying that I kept on reminding myself. There's one lady, and I don't know the name, I don't recall the name now, but I'm thinking whilst I'm talking to you or answering the question. It says, don't think that one person cannot change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that ever did. It took a few brave people on the 26th of August with one gun. You would know better. They had only one, but they made a symbolic demonstration. As of today, we are launching the armed struggle. For however long it took, we gained our independence on the 21st of March 1990. What am I saying? I'm saying young people are known to disrupt. And young people should disrupt the status quo. I've said it before, and I'm saying it all over in my class. In fact, the High Court said this, that by the time we gained independence, or with the adoption of our constitution, we were propelled from an era of authority to an era of justification. No decision maker can just take a decision because he or she can. Last week, Friday, Parliament was told, these laws that you've passed, both the common law and statutory law, that criminalizes sodomy, is irrational in an open and democratic society. Parliament. Our late president was told by the High Court and the Supreme Court, the power to allocate tenders is vested in the tender board and not in the President of the Republic of Namibia. So it is not about your position, it is not about your power. It is about, do you have the requisite power to do so? What am I trying to say? Challenge authority which, in your opinion, is unfairly, unjustly, and unprocedurally and unreasonably exercised. But my message to young people, and I'm concluding with this, to say that the problem that I see is that there's no solidarity amongst young people. And again, it reminds me, during the Holocaust, there was a German priest that wrote a poem, and it says, first they came for the Jews. I didn't speak up because I'm not a Jew. And then they came for the homosexuals. Again, I didn't speak up because I'm not a homosexual. And so he goes on. The problem is, young people find it difficult to show solidarity with each other's causes. I'm staying in Ludwigsdorp. I don't have a problem with youth unemployment. My family is well off and so forth. I'm having a comfortable place to stay. Why should I bother with young people sleeping in the lecture halls in the various campuses? What am I trying to say? Build solidarity, because an injury to one is an injury to all. In my other life, I was also the Secretary General of the Namibia Teachers Union. And as trade unionists, we used to say, and I think they still say so, an injury to one is an injury to all. But in conclusion, young people must learn to build solidarity so as to disrupt the status quo.
Wonderful, thank you. Well put, Dr. Nakuta. In closing, maybe if you can just address what has been sent to, what has been forwarded to you. Yes.
I think the issue of corruption, it is something that affects us all, and nobody tolerates corruption. It's something that causes the resources of the country being just profited by a few individuals. So if I have to speak to the ruling government, it's not being tolerated. And I mean, there are bodies like the Anti-Corruption Commission. I'm sure, like most people say, it's a toothless dog. However, there are procedures that the government has brought in to take care of corruption. Nobody tolerates it because it eats away from the greater masses of the country. So the leaders are not blind to corruption, and all I would say is that the individuals who are corrupt and doing corrupt practices, and if it's even amongst the young people, look at yourself and say, how am I taking away the resources that could have benefited the masses for my own personal gain? So it should be a self-introspection from those few individuals who are doing corruption or taking part into corrupt practices, because unfortunately, because of a few individuals, an entire organization is being seen as corrupt. But there has been measures that the government has put in place. I mean, our judiciary is independent. As you all know, there is a case going on where prominent leaders from government have also been arrested. So nobody tolerates corruption. And I would just say, do self-introspection. And as an individual who is practicing corruption or who is supporting that corruption, just know that you are taking away from the masses and taking away the resources that could have actually catered for a broader audience than just a few individuals that are self-enriching themselves through corruption. So that will be my stance on corruption. No one tolerates it. And unfortunately, because of affiliation, an entire organization is being labeled or can suffer against it. However, I would just call out to the few individuals that know themselves to know that you are doing harm to the nation.
Absolutely.
Through your corrupt practices.
Thank you. You throw the last dice.
Perfect position, actually. I think, you know, when we started with this whole entrepreneurship, young people getting tenders left, right, and center, with little financial literacy, I do believe we inculcated a tradition and a culture of stealing with entrepreneurship. One, because young people thought it was a way to get rich overnight. Two, young people, it was sort of this unregulated wealth, right? Nobody can tell you what you can do, what you can't do with what you earn through a tender that you did not complete. So say, for instance, Steven gets a tender to build a school in Karasberg or in Marintal or in Okakarara. And the tender is about, what, 30 million or 45 million. One of the things that was happening, and I think still happens, even though it's quiet now, is that tenders would not be completed, but the person would still, you know, grow in wealth, become rich. And so to a large extent, as young people watch these things on social media, on Instagram, this guy has a Ferrari one day, and tomorrow he has some fancy car. Everybody sort of began to think that if I just get the opportunity, if I can just get there, I will do the same as well. And so to a large extent, we've inculcated a culture of stealing amongst young people, so that at each turn they get an opportunity, whether it's a job opportunity, a tender. The first thought is not to give back to society. The first thought is not to build generational wealth for their children or their great-grandchildren, but rather, let me go buy a Bugatti or, you know, a Ferrari or those nice cars. So I think in the long term, we need to bring back conversations around ethics and ethical leadership. How do we ensure that these people that we put in offices do not just serve in their own interest, but really are there to serve in the interest of those of the larger citizenry? On the question of the rent control bill, Lloyd, let me just remind you that this is not a new conversation. The affirmative repositioning actually started the conversation around rent control. And really, imagine if this conversation had started around 2017 and how the market prices, especially in the rental industry, have increased, have become exorbitant to a point where, you know, if you go to South Africa, you can actually find a decent place, a 2-bedroom, for just 3,500. In Windhoek, in Namibia, my friend, let me tell you, a 2-bedroom flat, as long as it's not a backyard flat, would be 8,500 and upwards. It's unregulated, it's unsustainable, unreasonable, and therefore, I fully understand and I agree when you say The individuals who are supposed to put this law in place, the individuals who are supposed to bring this bill to the House, are landlords in themselves. And so I think we would give government the opportunity to respond to the question that was posted in the House. But beyond that, the rules give us an opportunity, and the Constitution give each member the opportunity and liberty, right, to introduce a private member's bill. So if it is really that government is dragging its feet or their feet on this bill, I am ready to bring a private member's bill to regulate rent. And this morning, I woke up to messages flooding all my inboxes from X to Instagram. And it's really messages that you can see are from people who are landlords. I agree with you, John. There's no solidarity in this country. And it's not just among the youth. It's also among adults. For as long as you are an adult who is a landlord, who leases out a place to a young person who is somebody else's child, you are okay with exploiting that child, but your child is in South Africa earning that money that another child is being exploited for. The solidarity conversation should not just happen here amongst young people, even the elders. Let's begin to have a conversation about how we can make each other's lives easy. Instead of, I was quite surprised when somebody said, yeah, it's basic economics, demand and supply, build more houses and the prices will go down. In the interim, what do you do? When you have an NHE that is politically sabotaged, does not receive enough monies to function as an entity that is supposed to build houses. In 2017, there was the first phase of NHE mass housing program targeted to build 9,000 houses with 3 billion. That 3 billion completely disappeared. The late President Geingob completely put to a halt that mass housing program in that particular year. But this is what I'm saying. For as long as we all don't benefit, no one must benefit at the detriment of the next person. So let's begin to have this conversation. But more importantly, the rest of us, if government is not going to do it, the rest of us are more than willing to bring a rent control bill, not one that proposes fixed prices to rentals, but one that regulates a relationship between your landlord and your tenant. And for as long as we don't have that, really, we're just going to continue being exploited. Look at our students in universities that hardly have any accommodation.
I just want to quickly add. Yes. I really like the idea of bringing a private Private members bill. In fact, the Rent Control Act, the Rent Control Ordinance, it's one of the best piece of legislations still on our law books. Of course, it serves a purpose only for people in urban areas and mainly for whites, but it talks about appointing investigators. It talks about a reasonable rent, looking at the size of the place that is rented out, the facilities available. Very good piece of legislation. So use the rent ordinance as a baseline just to improve. In fact, it also says you may not discriminate renting out your place against someone just because the person is having a child. Now we bring in, based on disabilities, based on rent, based on sexual orientation, because a lot of people cannot rent. So I actually like the idea of you introducing that citizens bill that seeks, because renting is really exploitative. It's exorbitant, and the state is having an obligation to protect those young people that cannot afford. Under international law, the state can't say it is a private matter.
Correct.
It is, we don't get involved in that space. You are expected to protect your citizens from being exploited.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I think I missed, somebody mentioned monitoring and evaluation. And I think it's something critical that government needs to look at.
Yeah.
Ministries, for example, have to show, like, have public discussions or give public platforms where they can say, these are the certain policies and programs that have been set out for this duration, and through monitoring and evaluation, we can see how far is the project, what has been done. Because some projects or programs have been effectively implemented, but the public doesn't know about that.
Yeah.
So through that monitoring and evaluation, as well as platforms where the community or the public can actually find out about what are the government programs that have been brought in place, and then how far are these programs, and then also account for why are we behind with certain programs that we have set out and the deadlines that we have set out. So that's also one of the good things. And I mean, coming from young people, it speaks that the interest is there. So your voice, these are the ideas that you can bring onto the table and that can also shape the direction of the government. So yeah, monitoring and evaluation very key, because if we don't monitor ourselves and if we don't evaluate the effectiveness of the programs that we are bringing in, then where are we headed? Yeah. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add. And that's not, it's on all levels of government.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The conversation ends here. I just wanted to give a small concluding story of an African country that I will not mention by name, where people were having a conversation. I think it's a social conversation, maybe at a bar or something like that. And there was this guy who was agitating about corruption. And he kept saying, he kept blaming people that are involved in corruption. And then somebody asked, what would you have done differently? Then he said, no, if you put me in a position like that, I will steal more, because these guys are actually underperforming in the space of corruption. So these are the real life African stories, but we need to readjust our ethical standards, our moral standards, and actually start looking at a society with a more, we are talking about solidarity here, that you can't thrive in a society that is, if you are surrounded by suffering, you yourself cannot thrive. You need everybody breathing well in order for you to also breathe as such. But thank you very much, Inna.
Thank you,
and Inno, and Dr. Nakuta. Really a very engaging conversation, and I hope, and to our audience also, very intimate, very small, but very engaging. So thank you, everybody.
And I would,
yeah, and of course to our viewers at home, thank you for tuning in. And
yeah, so sorry, before you close off, Twavo, the main purpose why we are here is young people getting involved in the voting.
Yes.
So I would say for the viewers at home and everybody seated here, if you are still undecided about why you should vote and who you should vote for, look at what are your interests. And if you say the government has not done anything, probably if you're not knowledgeable on that, I would say go on the platforms, acquaint yourself with all the policies and stuff that have been, all the programs that the government has done, and then also taking into consideration the national security and all that, and see how is Namibia done in that regard, and then you can go cast your vote and make the right choice, so that you don't also go make a choice that will disrupt the national security of the country.
Wonderful.
It's a very serious statement. I think I'm owed a right of reply to that, Twavo. But look, colleagues, we have given one political party over 30 years to govern us. In fact, if you are, to be quite frank, we have given too much time to one organization, almost turning our country into a one-party state, to govern our country, to steal from our people, to corruptly benefit from the resources of our country. Every young person here and those that are viewing from home has a responsibility to reflect on the billions that has been stolen through the SME Bank, through NHE, through Fish Rod. All young people, it is really upon each and every one of us to vote, but don't vote for the ruling party, vote for the PDM, and make sure beyond going to register to vote, you are actually turning up for voting. Unfortunately, I don't have riches.
But I think,
I don't have millions of dollars. I cannot buy you
Trevor, I would
t-shirts
say-
or buy you brechens.
I would say
but
that,
the work that the ruling party has done over
You have
30
seen it for
years,
yourselves. You are sitting
is
in a
evident and
university
enough
hall.
for
You are
you.
sitting in
Thank
a
you very
free and
much.
fair country. And yes, not all is rosy. I mean, as young people, we have seen what is happening on the ground. Not everybody is happy about it. And then there are decisions that are being made to take care of that. So use your conscience and also go and read up on what the government has done. I'm not saying specifically, yes, everything that has been done is rosy, but go and read up on what the government has done, look at the improvements that are being brought in, and then make your own decision. But what I would say is, look at the country right now, what you have got, the peace and stability, and also the student grants and everything else, that healthcare, youth programs that are being implemented. Nothing is perfect and nothing happens overnight. So, and that's why we are sitting here to say that your involvement is important, because you can also come and help make those changes and bring in your fresh ideas and your fresh minds to ensure that the government continues doing what they're doing for the country and improves on the service delivery of the country. So just make sure that you make an informed decision when you go to that ballot paper, but do your research and have an understanding of why you're going to cast that vote.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah. Thank you very much. This is the temperature that should have started this conversation.
No, don't go there.
It ended on a very good note. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you to our team here and audience, everybody at home. Thank you very much. It's time out. Thank you.